Am I the a-hole for ruining my family because I refuse to stop sleeping with my husband? I am a 43-year-old woman and I live with my 45-year-old husband in a joint family setup. We have 2 children, a 16-year-old and a 10-year-old, and we also live with my brother-in-law and his 10-year-old son, as well as my mother-in-law. My brother-in-law's wife passed away during childbirth. Last week, my mother-in-law came to me one morning and said she had woken up to get water, walked by my bedroom, and claimed she heard my husband and me being intimate. She told me it was inappropriate for someone my age to engage in such activities and that I should focus on being a mother. I was taken aback and quickly agreed not to be intimate anymore. 2 days later, she approached me again, saying she heard us again, and now she wants me to sleep in her room. She insisted this is how it should be, as she and my father-in-law also slept in separate rooms until his passing. Initially, I thought she was joking, but she returned at 1 a.m. and insisted I come to her room. She started raising her voice, so I agreed to go despite my husband's objections. The following morning, while I was in the kitchen, my husband came in, visibly frustrated. My brother-in-law also walked in and asked why I was sleeping in his mother's room, as he had come in to give her medications earlier. I was hesitant, but my husband tried to subtly explain that we were engaging in marital relations. My brother-in-law needed more clarification, and my mother-in-law entered the room. She told him it was because we were being inappropriate, which made me angry. I argued that it was normal for a married couple, but she began to insult me in our native language. Furious, I wanted to respond, but my husband stepped in, asking her to calm down. That's when his brother intervened, agreeing with their mother and implying I should not desire my husband. My husband finally snapped and told his brother that he was the reason his wife had died. For context, my brother-in-law's wife became pregnant 4 times before having their son, but he insisted she end those pregnancies until she had a son. This weakened her, leading to her passing. My brother-in-law was hurt and left the room. My mother-in-law blamed me and accused my husband of being shameless and a bad father. Now, my husband and I are considering moving out. We are unsure how to discuss this with our children. My brother-in-law has moved in with his late wife's parents, who called to say we were in the wrong for being vulgar and confronting him. They believe we should have listened to my mother-in-law. However, my own parents and brother think it is healthy for a married couple and that my in-laws are wrong for interfering in our marriage. I want to add that I am from India, where it is common to live in joint families. My husband and I considered moving out when our daughter was born, but after my brother-in-law's wife passed, my mother-in-law wanted help with my nephew. I love him like my own child, so I was all right with staying. He gets along well with our children. We cannot have a baby since I hit menopause early, which my mother-in-law knows. This weekend, my husband and I are moving to a friend's empty house. My mother-in-law is angry because my brother-in-law has gone to stay with his in-laws, who maintain contact for my nephew's sake. I had an honest conversation with my daughter, and she agrees we did nothing wrong. My husband has been very supportive through all of this. He also stood up to my mother-in-law when she accused me of breaking up the family. She tried to convince our son that we were the reason for the family discord, but my daughter calmed him down. Now, we are moving to the other side of town temporarily. My husband is seeking a transfer so we can relocate permanently, and I'm considering returning to work for additional income. Thank you for all your comments. NTA. Since when is a woman considered a worker for having a physical relationship with her own husband? I'll make this one short. NTA. A wife having a physical relationship with her husband is the absolute opposite of being a worker. Your mother-in-law's perception is truly concerning. As for your brother-in-law, engaging in physical relationships purely for recreation and then forcing his wife to terminate pregnancies because he is displeased with the gender. Furthermore, his argument that he would not have a physical relationship with his wife if she had a child, even if she were alive, suggests his marriage was doomed even before his wife's passing. It showcases a twisted and miserable mindset. They brought this upon themselves and they deserved every bit of what you expressed. Please, please move out. Those people are deeply troubling and toxic. Like, what on earth? You couldn't be less of a worker by having a physical relationship with your husband. That's the essence of marital intimacy. I'd imagine the perception of workerness increases in relation to how often the brother-in-law engages in physical activity now that his wife has passed. You married into a bunch of a-holes, laugh out loud. I would rather live in a cardboard box than deal with that nonsense. 43 is too old? At 43, some women are finally experiencing greater happiness compared to when they were younger. My wife wants to be intimate way more than she did in her 30s. She's almost 42. Also, your brother-in-law is really terrible too, making her terminate 4 pregnancies with girls. What's going on? It's a good thing you have a husband who stands up for you. I support you and your husband along with your children in moving out. Stay away from these a-holes and your life will be happy. Right? I'm 47 to my husband's 44 and we're just now hitting our stride. The idea of intimacy only for procreation? What on earth? That sounds like something out of The Handmaid's Tale, not going to lie. A cardboard box with holes in the middle of the street. Your mother-in-law and brother-in-law are toxic. You and your husband should distance yourselves as quickly as possible with the kids. You are not the a-hole. I am of Indian origin. You should not have appeased your crazy mother-in-law in the first place, especially since your husband protested. You gave the hag too much power. Let your husband deal with this and assert boundaries with his mom. Maybe moving out is a good idea. If you do decide to move out, keep your mother-in-law and brother-in-law on an information diet and only tell them when the paperwork is official. You can still be a good aunt to your nephew even if you do not live with him. I was mortified, so I quickly agreed to not engage in intimacy. I'm sorry, but I can't continue reading. I crumpled my glasses out of sheer disgust. I should have stopped reading. Regrettably, I kept going and it didn't get any better. Well, I suggest you go back and finish because it gets really crazy. The story includes, but is not limited to, a brother-in-law forcing his wife to have 4 terminations because they were girls. It is still time to move out, no matter how common and normal it may seem, because your mother-in-law and brother-in-law are not normal. Also, you should stop agreeing and doing what your mother-in-law says. That's another reason to get out of that house. Just because it is culture, it does not make it less toxic. Taking a poll on whether or not you should still be intimate is so messed up. Grown adults needing to ask everyone if they should or should not be intimate is ridiculous. Get out, have a life, and maintain self-respect. I am sorry, but I didn't know who else to ask because in our family, we do not talk about intimacy. Even when I started to tell my parents, my dad left and my mother informed him later. It is very taboo, and now I'm also worried about my kids finding out. This is so incredibly crazy. You should leave. Having a physical relationship is normal, and it's unfortunate that your mother-in-law never had a fulfilling experience, clearly making her resentful. It's healthy for you and your husband to have a physical relationship. Your brother-in-law is unfortunately a negative influence who did contribute to her passing, and you acknowledged it. Sometimes the truth is indeed painful. Your mother-in-law is unreasonable, and it's understandable that you didn't react more intensely. Leave and never look back. You are definitely not the one at fault here. It's honestly alarming how normalized this kind of control is in some families. Your mother-in-law and brother-in-law are using grief and shame as tools to control the original poster. She owes them nothing, especially not her body or her marriage. The brother-in-law is pathetic, and I hope he faces consequences for what he did to his wife. How heartless do you have to be to treat someone you're supposed to love in such a manner, all because of a son? Just move out. I am surprised that your mother-in-law even talked about intimacy, as most Indian women don't discuss it with their children or their spouses. Please move out because your mother-in-law has no right whatsoever to make you sleep with her. She's creepy, and so is your brother-in-law. He's like his mom. 4 terminations to get a son is heinous, cruel, and evil. Holy moly. I try not to judge the culture of others, but this situation is truly complex. It's considered acceptable to unalive female babies, but a husband and wife having intimate relations when not for procreation is seen as wrong. I don't have any practical input for you. I'm not sure Western audiences will be familiar enough with your culture to provide culturally appropriate responses. This is evident in the responses you're receiving, as people tend to react as if you live in a place like Chicago or London. This will be grossly offensive to anyone in the West. While conservatives might scorn the practice of ending pregnancies, liberals could be outraged by the suppression of a woman's sexuality. If you were in Chicago or London, there would be many good answers here. However, you live in India, where many of these answers might lead to social ostracism. Those who have spent their entire lives in the West often don't grasp how vastly different things can be elsewhere. A brief tourist visit provides a very limited and unrealistic view of another culture. I'm sorry for your situation and wish I had more to offer. Liberals will also be upset about forcing a woman to undergo pregnancy terminations. They don't celebrate the act itself. They support women having the choice to decide whether or not to have one. I second all of this. However, I would struggle not to tell my mother-in-law that I'm sorry she's never experienced pleasure, but I happen to like and enjoy being with my husband. She should mind her own business, and I would literally ignore everything she said after that. The statement that conservatives are going to scorn the ending of pregnancies, while liberals will be upset over the oppression of a woman's sexuality, isn't entirely accurate. The vast majority of liberals don't support pregnancy terminations based on sex selection either. Mother-in-law is acting irrationally. Tell her to go away. Married couples are seldom celibate. Have intimate relations whenever you both desire. Chances are that the mother-in-law had an arranged marriage. I would say that a lot of older Indian couples only had intimate relations to procreate, and some younger ones do too. There are some really messed up cultural norms around intimacy in South Asia. Of course, one cannot assume that there are no passionate marriages in India. It is more likely these days when you can actually meet your spouse before your wedding day, but it likely has happened now and then throughout history regardless.